Hi everyone, my name is Judy Sikora and I'm the Senior Family and Community Engagement Specialist at Child Care Aware of America and part of the team, the larger team, for the National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement, along with my colleague Jennifer Drake. And on behalf of the National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement, we're delighted to welcome you to today's webinar. We will be discussing Foundations for Quality, a consumer education and engagement series. This series consists of a 5-part set of resources designed to support states, territories, and tribes and others responsible for consumer education and engagement in developing and implementing effective, family-friendly consumer education as well as engagement strategies. So we'll start by introducing ourselves. Jennifer?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Drake. I'm Director of Family Community Engagement at Child Care Aware of America, and I work with the National Center on Parent, Family, and Community Engagement along with Judy.
Thanks, Jennifer. Well, I already introduced myself. I do want to make mention of Teresa Valdez-Bain. Teresa works with Jennifer and I at Child Care Aware of America as part of the PFCE team, and she will be helping us with the general chat today, looking at some of your comments, responding to your questions, and extending some of the dialogue that we have together today. So thanks for joining us, Teresa. We're going to start off today with a poll. As we begin our time together, we would like to know more about you. So can you specifically cite which role you have in your agency? And that will help Jennifer and I, as we're talking to you about these resources today, understand the context of your work. So we appreciate your participation. Okay, I think that's about it. So as we move forward, I'm just going to take a few minutes to just tell you a little bit more about specifically what we'll discuss today. We're going to introduce, Jennifer and I will introduce to you the Foundations for Quality, a consumer education and engagement series of resources. We're going to explain a little bit about each resource and how these resources can help you to accomplish your work every day. And the specific areas and the content areas that we're going to explore in each resource today include what is consumer engagement, keys to consumer engagement, features of a family-friendly consumer education website, and we'll also discuss using social media for consumer engagement. So at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Jennifer, and she's going to start our discussion. Jennifer?
Sure. Thanks, Judy. When you think about foundations for quality, you might first think of things like safe, healthy environments, licensing, provider-child ratios, positive interactions between providers and children and their families. You might not immediately think of consumer education and engagement. We titled this series Foundations for Quality to highlight the positive effects that consumer education and consumer engagement have on quality. Both indicate and drive quality in early childhood and school-age care and education. For example, both can indicate a provider's belief in the importance of valuing families and partnering with them to advance quality. Both drive quality when informed, engaged families influence and work to improve quality. Let's look at a couple more examples of how consumer education and engagement can indicate quality. Consumer education indicates quality when providers share relevant information to families, for example, information about child development or comprehensive services. An example of consumer engagement indicating quality would be a program that regularly seeks feedback from families. Here are two more examples of how consumer education and engagement can indicate and drive quality. Consumer education drives quality when families use the state's QRIS ratings to choose programs for their children. Consumer engagement can both indicate and drive quality when families and professionals talk and work together on monitoring results and corrective actions. Use the chat box to share examples of how your consumer education and engagement efforts indicate and drive quality. Meanwhile, I'll continue to move us along. So here are the 4 resources in this set, and we mentioned that it's a 5-part set. The 5th part is an assessment tool that's actually part of the guide to creating a family-friendly website experience, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But the 4 titles are Consumer Engagement Orientation for Early Childhood and School-Age Care and Education Professionals, Consumer Engagement Strategies for Engaging Families, Consumer Education Websites, a guide to creating a family-friendly experience, and Consumer Engagement using social media to engage families. The resources in this set are designed to support states, territories, and tribes and others, including CCR&Rs, subsidy agencies, all the partners. So all the people who are responsible for consumer education and engagement to develop and implement effective, family-friendly consumer education and engagement strategies. You can find a link to the resources in this series on the left of your screen where it says web links. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll also share the link to where you can find these on CCTA. So let's take a look at consumer engagement orientation for early childhood and school-age care and education professionals. We like to start off with why this matters, what each resource is intended to help you do. And the orientation is intended to help you build a foundation, a common understanding of terms and concepts to get everyone on the same page, in service of being better able to communicate and work together to enhance our practices. We'll sample some of what you'll find in the guide, the foundational definitions and concepts, in the next few slides. So if you've been working at the system level in child care for any length of time, you're probably familiar with the term consumer education. Here's how we think about it. Consumer education refers to providing information to parents to help parents build on their knowledge about program quality and options, as well as their knowledge about child development, available financial assistance, policies and procedures, for example, licensing requirements and how to make a complaint. It's also about sharing information with families about comprehensive services that interest them, all the services that support family well-being. Consumer education tends to focus on one-way communication of information to parents. Effective consumer education is designed to help parents make informed choices about early childhood and school-age care and education and comprehensive supports for family well-being. It's tailored to match parents' interests and preferences. It's culturally and linguistically responsive. It's based on data and research representative of children and families you're working with or hope to work with. And consumer education is reflective of exemplary practices to support child development and learning. Consumer engagement goes beyond making information available to families. Consumer engagement relies on two-way, relationship-based interactions between families and early childhood and school-age professionals. Parents and professionals share information with one another and work together to build each other's knowledge and capacities. This graphic depicts the two-way nature of consumer engagement. As families expand their knowledge and leadership capacities, they can become more effective in finding and applying research-based information For example, to inform their choices about a program for their child, monitor their child's experiences in a program, or use their voices to advocate for higher quality and equitable access to services. As early childhood and school-age professionals expand our knowledge and capacities, we can become more effective in inviting and responding to families' interests and values, and supporting and partnering with families and other stakeholders. When parents and families are engaged as consumers of early childhood and school-age services, they act as decision makers who are equipped with information and seek access to quality early childhood and school-age care and education for their children. Resourceful users of early childhood, school-age, and comprehensive services that support child and family well-being throughout early childhood and beyond. Trusted peers who help their friends and families understand and connect with the highest quality options available. And as leaders who advance program quality through leadership efforts in their child's program and in their community. Here's one example of consumer engagement. A child care resource and referral agency convenes a parent advisory board. The CCR&R promotes participation by offering child care and transportation to parents. And parents receive stipends for their participation. These board meetings present opportunities for meaningful exchanges of information between parents and staff, and they encourage shared decision-making. Thinking about the 4 family outcomes we just talked about for consumer engagement, decision makers, resourceful users, trusted peers, and leaders, which come to mind for this example? Enter your thoughts in chat if you would. Decision makers, resourceful users, trusted peers, and leaders. Eileen says all 4, and leaders. I see all. Mixture of all. Yeah, sure. So this example describes a parent advisory board. There are lots of ways to promote consumer engagement, and they vary in the amount of effort required. And we'll go over a few more strategies a bit later. Consumer education and consumer engagement are related but different from one another. Consumer engagement focuses on partnerships with parents, and it's distinguished by the two-way exchanges of information as families and professionals work together. So that's a glimpse of what you'll find in the orientation. And I invite you now to use the chat box to share examples of how you could, or maybe even have already, used this resource. And I will move on, and while you're chatting, and start to introduce the second resource. We think of the orientation that we just reviewed as a vision for consumer engagement. This resource, Consumer Engagement Strategies for Engaging Families, picks up where the orientation leaves off. It's all about strategies to operationalize that vision. Why might you use this resource? To consider keys and strategies for consumer engagement, and to find examples and resources to assist with your implementation. And we'll go over briefly some of what you'll find in this guide too. Here are 3 keys to consumer engagement, including families' voices, using strengths-based attitudes and relationship-based practices, and ensuring cultural and linguistic responsiveness. And we'll take a brief look at each a bit more closely. Including families' voices means inviting and respecting the values, opinions, beliefs, and linguistic and cultural backgrounds of all families. When professionals include families' voices, we recognize families' strengths and we're receptive to families' thoughts and understandings about their experiences and those of their children. Parents may share aspirations and goals they have for their child and family, and they may also share concerns and frustrations about barriers they encounter. Including families' ideas, ambitions, and feedback allows for open, two-way interactions that can ultimately favorably influence child and family outcomes and the quality of services and programs. Use the chat box to share some examples of how you include families' voices in your work. How do you include families' voices in your work? We'll wait just a minute. Parent feedback and suggestions. Tell us more about that. How do you get parent feedback and suggestions? Yeah, intentional listening and responding on phone calls. Listening to their struggles, being empathetic. Providing what they need when they ask. When they ask, I love that because that really speaks to providing information that's relevant to them, right? And offering more based off their need. Yeah, sure.
And also, too, Jennifer, not working from assumptions of what parents need. Good one.
Yeah. Ready to work with them as long as they need.
Samantha says, I'm not judgmental and always ready to work with them as long as they need. Yeah. Unbiased.
Yeah, surveys are certainly one way to get feedback from families. Lots of ideas.
Discussion with policy council and parent committee. That's also helpful as well. Individual parent discussions.
Yeah, I'm seeing some of the strategies that we actually talk about in this resource when we get there. So surveys and parent advisory boards, those are two of the things that we talk about in the guide for sure. Yeah, Teresa, you're right. There are many ways to invite parent voice. Feel free to keep sharing your ideas, and I'm going to move us along to the second key. Using strengths-based attitudes and relationship-based practices is also key to consumer engagement. Relationship-based practices guide what we say and do with families in all circumstances. Each family has unique goals and aspirations that we can support through genuine and equal partnerships. When professionals use relationship-based practices that build positive, respectful relationships, families are encouraged to be open and receptive to the information provided to them. They might also be encouraged to request assistance with challenges they may not have discussed otherwise, such as financial insecurity or housing instability. Relationship-based practices can also encourage families to act on opportunities to become involved as leaders and advocates. Examples of relationship-based practices include focusing on the family-child relationship. Families need to know that their relationship with their child is valued and supported. Reflecting on families' individual and cultural perspectives, we can work towards strong partnerships by showing genuine interest in families. Reflecting on our own personal and cultural perspectives. Our perspectives shape our conversations with families, and it's important to consider our own views when working with families. This practice encourages us to reflect on our interactions so that we can intentionally choose what we say and do. Supporting parental competence. This is about the parent's skills and self-confidence. Families benefit when we acknowledge their successes, their growth, and efforts. And valuing a family's passion. So passion refers to any powerful, compelling feeling or emotion. And raising children and working with families always involves emotions. We can expect parents to have strong feelings about what is happening in their families. Parents' passion, their strong feelings and priorities may or may not align with our own priorities. For example, parents may be extremely happy, excited, or maybe desperate about things like accessing subsidy and enrolling their child in a high-quality program. Or they may be or seem more passionate about some other aspect of their family's life. When we value parents' passion, we can actively listen and learn about parents' priorities and concerns, acknowledge parents' feelings, and find common ground through a shared concern for the child and family's well-being. And another key to consumer engagement is cultural and linguistic responsiveness. Culturally and linguistically responsive practices in consumer engagement recognize, affirm, and showcase all families' cultures, knowledge, and experiences. Culturally and linguistically responsive interactions with families are respectful. Professionals recognize and regard families and their own identities as multidimensional. We're all individuals and members of multiple social and cultural communities. These interactions are reciprocal. Professionals acknowledge that families have a lot to contribute, and we work together with them to find, share, and use information in support of families' well-being. Culturally and linguistically responsive interactions are also responsive. Professionals focus on connections between the experiences, perspectives, and behaviors of families and those of our own. Culturally and linguistically responsive practices are inclusive. As you seek to engage families across your state or in your local community, think about all the families and how you can eliminate barriers to their participation. That's a quick look at some of what you'll find in the guide about those 3 keys to consumer engagement. The guide presents 8 strategies for consumer engagement, some of which, as I mentioned, that I saw in your examples, which is wonderful. So the guide presents the strategies. It also offers tips for when you might want to use a particular strategy, and as I mentioned earlier, examples and additional resources for each strategy. The 8 strategies discussed in the guide are including interactive features in websites and social media posts, community assessment, data walks, focus groups, surveys, town halls, parent community or world cafes, and parent leadership groups or parent advisory boards. Have you tried any of these strategies? We saw just a little bit earlier. Here's another chance to talk about your work. Use the chat to tell us about it. Also use the chat to share how you might use this guide. And we'll pause just a moment here to see some responses, and then I'll turn it over to Judy, and she'll share a glimpse of the last 2 resources and then close us out today.
I'll just pause just a minute, Jennifer, to see, because I think there are a
Sure.
number of people
Yeah.
that are writing in the box. So we'll just, let's hear what people have to say first, and then I'll certainly continue.
Providing incentives is so important. Ooh, Carrie asks, how do most of you use World Cafes? Who's used a World Cafe model? And how? Yeah, going to where families are, those community resource fairs and other places where you find families, that's an important part for sure. Statewide community forums.
This is a comment for Nina. I see a notification, Nina, that we may be reaching the maximum content for this particular chat box. So I guess you see that, and then you'll add another chat box. It's okay. Okay, she's telling us it's okay. All right. I saw that little warning notice and got my attention, as it's supposed to, I guess.
So Kelly says in California they use World Cafes with Strengthening Families training and parent cafes through R&Rs. Love to hear more about that. Town hall meetings too. Kathy mentions. So we love to hear about your examples of work like that. And in the guide, there's always a way, in each of the guides, there's always a way that you can get in touch with us. And we usually have a little bit in there about, hey, if you're doing this, let us know how it's going. We really do mean that. So we'd love to hear more about all of these things that you're doing, realizing that the chat box, you only get to share a little snippet of it. All right, so that was a glimpse at the first two. Judy, do you want to take over and review the second two?
Sure, Jennifer, thanks. So the next resource, please also, all of you, continue to write if you have additional ideas, continue about the first two resources that Jennifer discussed with us. Please continue to write about those, and I'm going to talk about the next two. So our next resource is Consumer Education Websites, a guide to creating a family-friendly experience. This particular resource offers research-based information that agencies and organizations can use to create, also to enhance a family-friendly consumer education website. If you're responsible for developing and posting content yourself, or if you're supporting staff who do so, you can directly apply the information that's in this guide to your work. If your website is managed by others, or if you work with a vendor to develop and post content, you can also apply this information to your plans, to your requests with your vendor, and for quality improvement efforts. This comprehensive guide offers tips for plain language, reading levels, layout, promoting consumer engagement, and much more. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next few minutes. Along with the tips and resources that are referenced throughout the guide, this resource includes an assessment tool that you can use to evaluate the family friendliness of your consumer ed website. We encourage you to review the guide and the assessment tool together. We definitely advise you to review them together and not just use the assessment tool. We're going to show that to you in a few minutes. So why use this resource? Please think about your work, and if you would like, share examples in the chat box as we proceed with this particular part of our presentation, thinking about your website. So why do we use this resource? learn what makes a consumer education website family-friendly, as I mentioned, and also to evaluate the family friendliness of your website. So to do both of those. Let's start with what we mean by family-friendly. Family-friendly websites are easy to understand, they're strengths-based, they're culturally and linguistically responsive, and they're easy to use. They're user-friendly. In the next few slides, we're going to review a few highlights from the guide about each of these features. So when we use plain language, consult the federal plain language guidelines to inform your efforts to help families find what they need, to help them to understand what they find and use what they find to meet their own needs. The plain language guidelines cover thinking about the reader, organizing content, writing principles, and testing techniques. And the tips and strategies below that you see actually in the slide right here tell you a little bit more about that. When we use plain language, it means to be concise, keep sentences short and direct, use short, simple, familiar words, omit unnecessary words. For example, there are many factors to consider when choosing a child care provider is much more concise than, at this point in time, there are a number of different factors to consider when choosing a child care provider. Be clear. Keep paragraphs short and limited to one idea only. Use terms consistently. For example, we don't want to switch back and forth between child care provider, early educator, and caregiver. Decide on a term that you want to use consistently throughout your messaging to refer to that one person or that one role. Also, to write as you would speak. So think about different ways that you would write as you would speak. Use simple present tense action words and action verbs. For example, say, use these questions when interviewing a child care provider. Don't say, these questions may be used when interviewing a child care provider. Use pronouns to speak directly to readers. For example, say, you must provide a copy of your child's immunization records. Don't say, a copy of your child's immunization records must be provided. Use contractions where they sound natural. For example, you can say, I'm, the contraction I'm instead of I am. I'm worried about my child's development. Who should I call? Just think about the natural patterns of language and where contractions would naturally fall into that when you're speaking, and that's a good guideline for using plain language. Also, consider literacy and reading level. A large nationally representative study indicates that 82% of American adults have ample literacy knowledge and skills needed to search, compare, contrast, and to integrate information from print and digital text. These tasks are more complicated for the nearly 1/5 of American adults whose literacy knowledge and skills are limited to recognizing and understanding simple words, sentences, and paragraphs. It's generally considered that an 8th grade level is the accepted information meant for the general public. For much easier reading, aim for 6th grade level when developing content for parents. The Flesch-Kincaid readability test can be useful in measuring the grade level of your content. You can find this readability test in your word processing software. You can Google it and it will pop right up for you. You can use plain language strategies to help lower the reading level. For example, try shorter sentences and words with fewer syllables. Now we're going to spend a couple of minutes talking about features of a family-friendly website and focusing on strengths-based. All children and families have strengths. Families are the first and most important teachers of their children. Families are the one constant in a child's life, in children's lives, and children's healthy development relies on sensitive and nurturing interactions within the family and within the community. Families are our partners with a critical role in their family's development. Families make choices every day that affect a child's development and their learning as well. And these choices are rooted in their belief systems and their cultural identity. Families have expertise about their child and their family. Families understand their children best, and they can make decisions for their children's well-being. When families share what they know, children, families, and providers benefit. Everyone wins. Families' contributions are important and very valuable when we are open to their suggestions and their requests, and we're very good listeners. This helps us to do our best on behalf of their child. The following statements are examples of how strengths-based attitudes can be translated into key messages and action steps. You may want to consider using these statements on your own or similar statements in a text context. And this is just to give you a couple verbal examples. Here are some right now. You are your child's first and most important teacher. As you search for childcare, consider which program best matches your family's and child's approach to learning. Here's another example. You have a critical role in your family's development. Talk with your childcare provider about your family's needs and goals. A third example. You are the expert on your child and family. Look for a childcare provider who asks for and respects your input. And one more example. As your child's first teacher and decision maker, your input is important and valuable. Work with your childcare provider to find ways that together you can support your child's learning in childcare and at home. And as I gave you 4 quick examples there, please feel free as we continue to go on in today's webinar, and if you have other examples that you've used that you feel are strengths-based and you'd like to share them, please put those in the chat box. Features of a family-friendly website, and this is a continuation. People-first language is really key. This acknowledges the individual before the situation they may be experiencing or any eligibility criteria that they may be determined to meet. When you use people-first language, you describe a person's circumstance and you avoid defining them by that circumstance. And we have 2 examples here on the screen for you. We say families with low incomes as opposed to low-income families. We say children with special needs as opposed to special needs children. Let's talk about culturally and linguistically responsive as it relates to your website. Your consumer education website can be the first place where you can help families feel very welcome. It can also mitigate and prevent disparities related to access to information about early childhood, school age, and also comprehensive services. Each family in the community you serve has a unique set of beliefs, values, and priorities that should be respected and taken into account when developing web content. Key issues including education, family roles, caregiving practices, even what determines acceptable child behavior and school readiness are all strongly influenced by a family's culture. The cultural beliefs of families directly inform decisions made about their children. Some tips for developing content that is culturally and linguistically responsive are, one tip is to choose visual images that will encourage all families to feel included. Another tip, describe your organization's efforts to be inclusive and serve diverse families. And a third tip is consider highlighting the cultures and languages, English and other languages, that are represented by your staff. Let's talk about another feature of family-friendly websites, easy to use. Make your website easy to use by helping families find it and by creating content that is easy to see and to use. Help families find your website. Use keyword meta tags to ensure that your website appears in the top 30 options from search engines. Meta tags are little snippets that summarize a web page's content before visitors click on the page. Consider search terms a parent might use, for instance, babysitter, daycare, help paying for daycare, preschool, vouchers, and embed those terms in the meta tag code that you develop. Next, make your content easy to use. Use a 12-point or larger Verdana or Arial font for standard text and links. For headings, you can use serif fonts if desired for design purposes. Use text, not images, for links. Use black or other very dark text on a white or off-white background while presenting text information, including headers and captions. And include a site map families can refer to see all of your website's pages at a glance. Make your content easy to use. Organize information so that any piece of information can be found in no more than 3 clicks or navigation steps. 3 clicks seems to be just about the limit in terms of people having patience to find what they're looking for. Simply navigation from page to page with previous, next, and home buttons. Make sure that all the information on the home page can be seen without having to scroll up and down or side to side. Include an internal search function families can use to find information on your site by entering keywords. Provide print-friendly options to print content and forms. Acknowledge user submissions, applications, questions, comments with an automated response that includes a thank you and next steps. And last but not least, avoid empty, under construction, coming soon, and page not found pages. We all know, have experienced that and know what that can cause in terms of frustration for the user. So here we have a picture, a visual picture. We really don't expect for you to be able to see the fonts here, but we're giving you this little snapshot, so when you do see this, when you look up the resources on CCTA, you're going to recognize it right away. This is a picture of the assessment tool, what it looks like in the guide, and this tool supports your efforts to create a family-friendly consumer education website. You can use this tool along with the tips and resources referenced throughout the guide to address the unique needs of your website review. This tool is meant to enhance your use of the guide, not as a replacement. So keep in mind, sometimes, it's kind of like, a Cliff Notes summary. We want to maybe go to the back because it gives us a quick and thorough summary of the content. This isn't really the intention of the tool, so it's very important. We strongly encourage you to review the guide and the assessment tool together and use them together. Okay, so why don't you, I'll just pause for 1 minute here, a minute or two. Why don't you write some of your ideas in the box if any of what I had shared with you, the strategies about website development and use, if anything triggered an idea to you that you would like to implement in the future or that you are doing already, please write that in the box. Oh, Corey is saying, this is a very encouraging group. It's good to hear that you're enjoying your time with us. Really good comments. Okay. We are going to move on to, because I'm looking at the time, we're going to move on to our fourth resource. Often when we're talking about consumer education websites, questions come up about how to get families to your website. And one way to make this to happen is to focus on using social media, right? So social media can also be a powerful tool for consumer engagement. And this resource, Consumer Engagement Using Social Media to Engage Families, is our fourth resource that we're sharing with you today. So why use this resource? We use this resource to view research on how parents and other groups use social media. Sometimes it's important, right? As you use social media, where do I fall in the fray? Where, what are other people doing? And the research information can really help you develop a perspective on your work, a context for your work in social media or other things as well. Develop or strengthen a social media plan. This resource will help you do that. If you've already have social media plans, maybe this particular set of ideas to implement for a plan may be different than what you're doing. It may enhance what you're doing, or it may validate what you're doing. Choose the best sites and times to post. That's also something else that is important to consider because you want the most viewers, right? So some information about that can be very helpful and also save time for you and your staff. Create posts that encourage consumer engagement. Those are all reasons why you would use this resource. So let's take a little more stronger look at additional information about the social media planning guide. Using a social media plan itself is to guide your efforts and to develop your team's capacity to engage with families using social media, which is very helpful. There are several steps to consider as you begin to create, to review, or enhance a plan for engaging families through social media. And the areas that the guide covers are listed here on your screen: identifying your mission, your audiences and purposes for posting, establishing your goals, your objectives, and your quality assurance measures, developing policies and allocation of resources, choosing where and when to post, promoting your efforts, creating your posts, and engaging with parents and others after you post. So just for a minute, as we've talked with professionals across the country, including some of you perhaps even, many of you have reported that your posts tend to lean toward consumer education, more so than consumer engagement. And as Jennifer discussed with us a little bit earlier in today's presentation, the aspects of, the elements of, and the comparison between the two, consumer education and engagement. It certainly seems relevant for us to talk about the differences within this context of social media. And that's not to say that posts intended to provide consumer education are bad. They are not, and consumer education posts can be great. It depends on what your goal is, though, right? Depending on what your plan is, what's your focus for your social media work. That's where planning and goal setting comes in. And here are some examples of how posts might look different depending on your objectives. Are you trying to provide education, or are you trying to encourage engagement? So let's look at the slide for a minute. So education, within the context of social media, is providing a link to a website. That's a good example of education. A social media education example, another one, is offering a research-based statement or a resource itself. And a third one is to promote events or activities hosted by your agency. So it's really providing information to your audience. Some examples of social media engagement are encouraging word of mouth discussion based on some of your posts, also responding to online questions, asking users a question about their priorities or concerns as it relates to their child care needs. So, but what if people do respond? What then? Engaging online can be tricky. If you're online at all, you've seen organizations and people excel at this, the back and forth, and you've probably seen examples of when an exchange didn't go very well for at least one of the parties that are involved. And that's why, as mentioned on the previous slide, we included in the guide itself, tips for responding to families after you post. A sample comment policy and some ideas are included about policies and procedures to have in place. So similar to the tool in the Consumer Education website guide, we've included a planning tool in this guide as well. And you can use this tool to support your efforts to create a plan for using social media. The tool is meant to enhance your use of the guide, and we encourage you to consider the tips and resources in the guide and this planning tool together, just as we had said earlier. So I'm just going to pause for a minute and see if there's any more comments that anyone would like to make about either their journey through the development and use of their website, making it family friendly and talking about all the elements that we've just discussed with you, and also too thinking about social media and the extent to which you use social media. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just dabble in a little bit, or maybe you consider yourself rather advanced and you have a social media plan, etc. Please share. I'll just pause for a couple of minutes and see if you have anything else to share about that. Not seeing any comments, so maybe this is more of a technical area. So, oops, I see some people typing. Never mind. Okay, we're seeing a comment. Okay, we just started with Facebook. Been using Twitter for a couple of years. Okay, Carrie, thanks for sharing.
As Judy mentioned in the social media guide, there's a lot of data about groups of people and which platforms are more likely to be used by parents and other teens and adults based on a whole bunch of demographics. So that's an important part of the planning. I'm seeing lots of different platforms here.
Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and Twitter. A couple more comments coming in, so we'll... Okay, so Sunny's saying that the Office of Early Learning in Florida, they plan out their social media for consumer ed a month in advance. They address different areas. Oh, they also Pinterest too. That's another platform. Okay, so quite a few of you are saying that you use multiple platforms, and as Jennifer said, you might be, if you haven't already seen it, you might really be interested, based on your experiences. Look up some of the data that's shared in the guide regarding various platform use, also times of day, etc. And what kinds of posts do best in what sort of platform, which kind of platform. And some of them are more conducive to less text and more strong on pictures, as we all know, like Instagram, etc. But and there's some things that the users here probably already know, but it's also nice for validation, right? So you can read some of that data and say, that's our experience too. And sometimes we all need validation in the work that we do. Righty. Will you continue to write in the chat? I'm going to move to the last slide, which gives the resources. Jennifer, is there any last thoughts that you'd like to add before I move to that final slide?
I think we can move along, Judy. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat in the meantime.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
So here on this slide, everyone, the Foundations for Quality series that Jennifer and I discussed with you today. Here are just some quick snapshots of the 4 covers of each one of those resources and the link on Child Care TA, CCTA, where you can find all those resources. And as we mentioned a little bit earlier, that here's a link that we promised we'd give you at the end of today's presentation, and also too, the slides will be available. Nina had said the slides will be available very soon on CCTA as well. So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for your work. And we wish you the best for this week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.